What's up, YouTube? Today we've got a 2014 Chevy Cruze with a 1.4 liter turbo, and we're going to be replacing the intake manifold gaskets, the valve cover gasket, and a PCV hose. Stay tuned. But first, I wanted to announce we've got some Andy's Auto merch now. We got a hat, a shirt, a sticker, a coffee mug, and even a hoodie. You can find these items listed below the video, or you can go to my channel page and you can find them under the store section. If you're interested in supporting the channel while also getting some pretty cool gear for yourself, go ahead and check those out. Now back to the video. Alright, so here's the engine here. We're going to go ahead and get started over here by removing this tube from the throttle body. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Alright, so we got the intake air duct disconnected from the throttle body, and also went ahead and pulled the engine cover off. Now we're going to go ahead and pick up some of this wiring here so we can get it out of the way. And we're going to go ahead and disconnect the fuel injectors so we can get that out of the way as well. Then we'll start working on removing this PCV line, I guess it is. This is the one we're replacing. Goes this little thin one's part of it too. It goes here, and then it also goes down to the turbo. So we need to get that removed as well. I'm probably just going to film this a few pieces at a time because it is kind of raining on me, and it's somewhat of a longer job, so I do want to kind of get it done with relatively quick amount of time, but I will try to show you the steps to the best of my ability. Alright guys, so we got some of these wiring harnesses up out of the way, and got that hose disconnected right here. It's just got one of them little clips. You pull it out, lift it up. We got it disconnected from a couple of the hold downs there, and it actually goes down here. See if I can get you guys on it. Oh, yeah, it goes right there. You can kind of see where that little hose plugs in right there, that thin one with the bluish clamp. So we're gonna have to get that disconnected with some pliers from back here above the alternator. And then we should be able to get the other end off of it fairly easily. Alright, so we went ahead and pulled this up out of there. It clips in right there with this little deal here. And we also pulled this off, disconnected it from the hose here. You just push in on tabs on both sides. I'm going to try to leave as much stuff connected as I can. Went ahead and unplugged this just to get some more slack. And then next thing I want to do is go ahead and get these injectors disconnected, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so I got in there with my flathead screwdriver, got all the injectors disconnected. You can see one of the connectors right here, just one of them little push down spring deals. As you push it down, they release, but the clamp or the spring is facing the valve cover, so you have to stick a screwdriver down between the injector and the connector in order to push down that spring, because you'll never get your finger in there. There's no shot, so you'll have to use a flathead on that. Did end up having to disconnect the electrical connector on that just to be able to pull these wires back some more. Also stuck a flathead down in these little tabs and pushed the holes rather, and pushed the tabs towards the air filter box, and that enabled me to lift this up off the valve cover. Just to get some more slack, I pulled back the safety and pushed down. This is the intake VVT solenoid, I believe, so you want to disconnect that. And then may even go as far as to disconnect this one as well. I believe this is the intake cam sensor, but I'm not going to take that off unless I have to, but it would be kind of nice. It's kind of hard to get that out with just my finger, so if you need to do that, you can. If not, you probably can get away without doing that. So the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is remove these two Torx bolts so we can pull out the fuel rail. Alright, so we took those two Torx bolts out and we got the fuel rail removed and moved over to the side. I got this rag here just so it's not touching the dirty air filter box and getting anything inside of it. We didn't lose any of our O-rings inside the intake, so that's good. Ideally, you want to replace these O-rings when you pull the fuel rail. So go ahead and do that. If you have some on hand, it's definitely a good idea to do that. And now we pretty much have the intake exposed here. So we want to start removing all of the bolts that holds it on. It looks like we've got one bolt there, two there, another two there with the ground strap on it, and then a final one over there. And then this little stud here is where that ground strap was sitting. So don't forget to take that off. It's just a 10mm bolt. Also, I went ahead and unhooked the clamps, or loosened them rather, so that we can get this PCV the rest of the way out. I don't even know if it's technically a PCV, but that's what it says on my work order, so that's what I'm going with. So anyway, we're gonna go ahead and get that disconnected the rest of the way, and I just felt like taking this out would help out with that. All right, so now we've got all of those intake bolts out, as you can see, including the top one right here that had the ground wire. Naturally, since that one had electricity going through it from time to time, it was a little more difficult to loosen out than the rest of them, I assume due to electricity and corrosion and whatnot. But as long as I'm not missing anything, we should be able to kind of pull this back enough to change out the gasket. Looks like we might be stuck on something over here. Maybe it's just this. I think that's what it is. We got a heater hose connected to it, so I'll have to get that off there, and then we should be able to pull this back. Okay, so I got that heater hose disconnected from the back, and I also had to disconnect the throttle body connector because it wasn't allowing me enough slack to pull it up. But now we got the intake enough where we should be able to go ahead and replace the gasket without taking apart or disassembling it any further. And then we'll go ahead and get the valve cover done and this hose, and we'll be all finished up. All right, so here's our old gasket removed and our new gasket from Fel Pro. If it ain't a Fel Pro, then hell no. So now we're gonna go ahead and put this back on the intake. You need some new headlights for your vehicle? How about some turn signals? Some that are actually very bright. Click the link in the description below and check out Auxito LEDs. And if you use code AndysAuto, you'll get 15% off your order. Now back to the video. And that's our new gasket installed. So now we're going to go ahead and replace the intake back into position and put the bolts back in and kind of rewind everything we've done so far. And then we'll get started on the valve cover gasket. All right, so now we got all of the intake bolts tightened back up. Ground strap in place. Is it tightened up or tightened down? You guys can tell me in the comments below. But I also want to take this opportunity to point out to some of my more novice viewers that you don't always have to take everything apart in order to get the job done that you're trying to do. For example, I did not pull this intake out of the vehicle completely. I did not disconnect the fuel rail completely. Didn't even have to relieve the fuel pressure because we're technically not even opening the fuel system. And a lot of these other things I just kind of left in place and moved them out of the way as necessary. But my younger self would have taken that whole thing apart, and it would have taken so much longer, and it would have been a lot more work for me. So if you're kind of just starting out or you're relatively new to this, don't think you always have to take every single thing completely apart or completely out of the vehicle in order to get the job done. Let's get back to it. All right, so I went ahead and took a few more steps, most of which you've already seen, just in reverse order. We went ahead and reconnected the intake air duct back to the throttle body and plugged the throttle body connector back in. Went ahead and clipped this heater hose back in on the back side of the intake. We went ahead and put this purge solenoid or whatever it is back in place and reconnected the hose, and then we also reconnected both of these electrical connectors here. Also went ahead and reconnected all 4 of the fuel injectors. We put the fuel rail in, tightened up the 2 Torx bolts, and did not forget to install our ground strap there. And then also went ahead, took a couple extra steps and loosened up the ignition coil here. So we should be able to go ahead and pull that out. May need to use a pry bar right here actually to get that out. Then I also went ahead and loosened the bolts that go around the valve cover as well. So we're going to go ahead and pull that off. Also, I've been misspeaking the entire time on this job. We're actually going to be replacing the entire valve cover because the PCV valve is inside the valve cover and they want that replaced. So we've got an entire new one here today. Alright, so I went ahead and wiped down the gasket mating surface on the top of the cylinder head, and the new valve cover just had the gasket and bolts and everything already in place, ready to go. So all I had to do was set it down, tightened up the bolts in a star pattern. So now we just need to replace the O-ring on the oil cap because the new valve cover did come with one of those, and then we'll go ahead and put our coil back in place. Also, I forgot to mention, you want to put a little bit of RTV underneath here on both sides in that spot, kind of where the front cover meets the engine. Now we've got the ignition coil reinstalled and plugged back in. So now we just need to finish up with this hose here. So we need to kind of squeeze those 2 together and pull it out, and then we got to follow this vacuum hose down here to that clamp and get it disconnected. Alright, so we got the old one removed here just by kind of squeezing the 2 tabs. That one's the intake end. These are the 2 tabs you need to squeeze together. And of course you got to get that disconnected from the turbo. The new part doesn't come with clamps on the far end, so we're going to have to swap over these outer clamps on both ends to the new part, and we'll get it reconnected. Alright, so we got that new one all connected. We got it down there on the turbo, got it routed properly back up to the intake and snapped in. Then that hose we got reconnected down there as well. So now we're going to go ahead and put this engine cover back on, and we'll be all finished up after we put this air duct on. Also, don't forget to reroute and reconnect all your wiring over here on this side of the engine, as well as plugging back in your intake VVT. Alright, and that's what we should look like once we're all finished up. Alright, that's going to be the end of the video for today. If you learned something, please leave a like below. If you have anything you'd like to add on or mention to help others out, please leave a comment below. I'm sure the community would definitely appreciate that. Also, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. We're trying to get up to 2,000 subscribers as soon as possible. That'd greatly help me out. Otherwise, I will see you next time.